So let's move a bit further, and now what we are going to discuss is nothing but using the ORM, the mapping to another level. So we are introducing something called entity framework, and let's look into the commands and everything. And let me just open on track for once to showcase the command step by step how to do this task. Second, and I'm going to run my project again, and the task for this is object-oriented mapping. So we discussed it earlier using the past members. Now we are actually implementing the entity framework. So let's open the task sheet and go through step by step. So firstly, we had to download the framework core package for that. So selecting this command, let's open another terminal and pasting this command. And then we need the NPGSQL because the Postgres connection to establish the Postgres connection, and then the .NET EMP because in order to actually working with the framework we need that, and connecting the database eventually. So these are the packages, and the other thing is when we have actually generated, we have actually dealt with the package, the yeah, entity framework package, then we have to modify those project files. For that, we need to download the design package for that. There's the command. And after downloading all these files, you just had to go through this particular application. So it is already installed, as you can see. And you just have to go to your files and look on the extension file .cs, and in that extension file .cs prog, and you can see that what type of frameworks we have downloaded. So we have included fast member, which we dealt with earlier. Then we have the open API because we are dealing with the APIs, and then the entity framework core design, the NPG package, which is required for the all those things are okay. So we have basically installed all the necessary requirement, and then we are going to talk about the entity framework. So it actually reduces our work at a frequent level because we don't have to write the npg commands again and again, and we just have to define a particular context file which has everything in it, and then all those context file which is basically a which has methods called, just let me just show you, which has particular methods called virtual. So what those particular virtual method does is like you can use them in other files as well, and it is partial, so it means like you can use it in other files, and in case of being virtual you can override it, you can make multiple number of changes, and these virtual things methods basically are the part of partial class, so you can actually use them in other files as well. So after downloading all the dependencies or not, let's talk about the entity framework. So we have, it could be done in three different ways. First could be the code first. Second is model, and third comes you have to design the database first. We have generally dealt with the designing the database first because we go to the Postgres and design our tables and everything over there. So we establish a connection, then we create tables and everything in that. So we are dealing with the database first, which is a good thing practices because it decouples everything. Talking about the code first, so in case of code first, you have to define the particular thing, everything is being defined in the C sharp, and C sharp is the one which is responsible for creating the entities, and those entities are actually helping us to frame what kind of database we need. So everything is done through code. Doing everything via code can actually lead to pretty much a couple project, like you have to inherit everything from other things and making the project much more heavier on a system. And in order to do that, we have to we have to use something called migration. And then in case of model, it is pretty much similar as the code. And it is also like it's not that loosely coupled, so it is again tightly coupled. So those two could be dealt in case you have a pretty good system with much more storage. So let's go to the another step where we actually generate our context file, which is the one responsible for actually giving us the framework, like what we can map our things to. So before that, what you need to do is you need to establish a primary key in your database. So let's see what kind of keys do I have in my database. So let's see whether I have any primary key in my database. So I have written this command to check like whether there's a primary key. So map has the ID, and let's check for the robot command as well. So again, it has another primary key. So it's the same, similar. So ID. And let's move to the next step. So after doing all those things, you need to make a context file, and that context file is automatically generated using the entity framework. So this is the command for that. Now in here, you need to make certain changes. Let me tell you something. So the local host remains same. Uh, Select type the database whichever you're working with. I'm working with Postgres. The username is again Postgres for me, and you have to enter your password. After that, just it will generate the. You need to create a folder called models, in where it will actually generate whatever the table files you have actually inside your database for that particular database. So I had map.cs and the robotcommand.cs. And it has generated me this file called robotcontext.cs. Let's look on to the map.cs. So in here, when the first time it creates, like you will be able to see like the I remains to be smaller and the remains to be capital. So it uses the Pascal case. And the thing which I was working, so my models had all these things, all these attributes to be capital. So you need to make changes because it follows the Pascal command, and you might haven't followed that sort of coding practices in your code. So you need to make changes in this. And same goes for the other model class. And after that, let's look on to the robot context.cs. Now, this is an interesting part. So I told about it like it created us with the partial class. Now partial class means we can use this class in other files because we need to use the context file in other files. I'll be getting on to that. Then uh, it is actually using the DbContext. Now DbContext is actually helping me to connect to the database, and it has created a default constructor, another constructor with the options. So all those configurations are stored in here. And then I have this maps list properties and another one. So here you can see it says virtual. Virtual means you can override. So you can modify it whenever you want, and you can override it, just changing the name onto something, and you can use the same thing. So if you looked into your previous files, you would be seeing that read only. So you can't use that particular private variable somewhere else to create the classes. But for this, as these are suggested to be virtual, you can use them. You can use the similar name anywhere you want. Then let's just leave this for once. I'll be coming back to it. Now it will automatically generate this model creating file. Now this helps to map your database with the help of entity framework. So the model builder, it is using the entity. So what kind of entity? First is map, another one is robot command. So first, it is using the hash key and dot ID. It is mapping, like it says that it's a primary key over in the map, and the other, it is mapping to the table map. Then what kind of properties I have? I have ID, I have columns, created it, when was it created, description, is square. All those things are available onto the Postgres if you wanted to see. I can write a query to help you out. Okay, it's there. So I have this ID, columns, rows, is square, description, all those things. And you can say created, date, modified date. So it maps all those things, all those properties using the entity framework. And then it does the same work for the robot command. Now, we are actually, when we were dealing with the persistence class earlier, we created this data access file, which we keep on writing the same thing again and again. Not this. In this, we are actually dealing with the persistence class, but with the help of the entity framework. So let's look into this. So whenever you are creating these files, keep in mind of the namespace you're using and what kind of files you are taking information out of it. So you need to mention it. Sometimes you end up getting it just because you're not mentioning the other files that are actually being used by it. So I have created this map data access. It's nothing but the interface which has the delete, add, create method in that. And talking about the read only, so you can't use this anywhere else. So now created a constructor, set the value. Now construct this entire thing is not in entirely control of it. That's why it has created a construct. I have created this constructor, and you can use it wherever you want. Then, in case of the data access, we had to write these things like connecting to the particular, establishing a particular connection, opening the connection, writing the queries, and all those sort of things. So it is using the context file, and in that we haven't defined everything. So here we have defined like what kind of context it is using. It's using maps, then selecting what are we selecting, ID, columns, and all those things, and storing them in the list. Then adding it, same goes here. Now, how does it know that what kind of parameters we are using and saving all those changes? So saving changes is important because then only it ultimately, if you just update those values and don't save the changes, it won't be directly shown to you onto the database. So how does it know what kind of parameters you are transferring? That is done using this. So protected, it's protected. So you can override, you can change the configuration. Now what kind of configuration is there? It checks like whether it was originally configured or not. If it wasn't, then we have to configure it. So it established the connections here. So all those particular things that we will keep on writing it in the app.data in the data access could be narrowed down on to 3 lines. So firstly, establishing a connection. Then the log.log2 actually helps you get the query, what kind of query the user has written. and the enabling the sensitive data log is actually getting the particular attributes out of that query. And that's how when we are actually using the MapEF file, it knows what kind of attributes we are dealing with. And same happens in case of the RobotCommand.cs. So let's run it and test it out on Postman. Seems to be problem with it. Run. Let's just close it and open it once again. There seems to be a problem. Let's just go to the URL and run. Okay. Instead of copying map maps, let's just get the value out of it. Let's see whether it's working. So it's working, and if you go to the DB console, so the terminal is actually telling what kind of execution we have done and how much time it took. Just a second, there seems to be an error once again. So you can copy how much time it has taken to to get those things from the database and everything. So whenever you're writing every particular URL on the Postgres or on the Postman, you will be able to see all these information, and then you can store those information, and that's what the other file you need to upload for this task. So thanks for watching.